That's a good question. I think that these things are probably a little bit more fluid than the steps go, but you can say I'm kind of close here, or maybe I'm half this and half this. Like sometimes I'm this, I'm just kind of walking my mind around through the tournament, and sometimes I'm winning, and I want everybody to know, and it's great. But then I'm like, well, that wasn't very satisfying. Now I've been doing debate so long, why do I keep doing this? Why do I keep giving up my weekends doing this? What's the point? What am I getting? And you start to think, like, what's the point of being in college? What's the point of coming to university? What's the point of reading another book? You start to kind of unravel everything. So it could be that you're in between, and I think you can slip back too. But I don't want to go too far in that because I grew up in the West. I'm pretty Western-minded, so I'm always trying to think more like this than this, which is a difficult thing for me because I think this is where the alternative narrative of debate is going to come from. I think so. There's somebody over here. Yep.
You talked about whether you thought argument was superior to reason, or reason superior to argument, and then you explained the results of either of those perspectives. But how do you arrive at one of the two perspectives? Like what contributes to the arrival?
Well, I think for most of West, I'm going to paint with broad brushes here, so I hope I don't offend you. And if I do offend you, please let me know, and we can have like a little debate about it. But I think over here you have everything from like classical philosophy on would say that reason is the thing that's primary and important, and that's the thing that human beings should be good at. And then arguing is something that you do later. After you've figured out what's true, then you go and argue about it because you already know what's right. And so that's the only time you would want to do argument. The alternative mode of thinking is that argument is what we do as humans, and reason, I mean, this is what the cognitive scientists are saying in this paper. Reason evolved to help us be better arguers. Right? So this is still a hot debate not all cognitive scientists accept this at all. Right? At all. And a lot of philosophers might not accept it at all, to be like, argument is the thing that, like, reason serves argument. Right? But I don't know how you would decide it. I think most people are sort of taught this relationship because they're taught that certain things, like we can get to the truth if we look at it through two different perspectives long enough. We can make objective views. We can say something that is timeless and stable. And then over here you have, we can't really come to a mutual understanding of views, but like if we tried to do dialectic in here, where you both sit down and hash something out, it would take us days and days. There's so many of you. And for all of us to agree completely, like faithfully agree, or like have the faith that we're like telling each other the truth about our feelings, and that, it would take a very long time. And in most political situations, we don't have that. So we turn to rhetoric instead, which is, I'm going to persuade them using the things they already value to bring them to what I think is good for them to do. And so that would be where reason would be subject to argument. I guess you can look at and decide which relationship you want, but each relationship comes with several bags of stuff to carry. Like there's not one that's right. It just depends on what kind of bag. Do you want to carry the duffel bag or the suitcase of extra stuff? Everything's linked to, every assumption you make is linked to a lot of baggage that you might not want. So I guess that would be my advice about how you would know. But I also think that it might not be as clear as this. There might be times, speaking as a rhetorician, there might be times where you want to portray argument as serving reason to get across what you want to get across to the audience. Or you might want to portray it the other way. But what I thought was just fascinating is, here are cognitive scientists saying something that rhetoricians have been saying for a long time. And people who study argument have been saying for a long time. And it made me think, in my recent work, thinking about alternative ways of justifying debate, saying debate is good, other than the standard defenses, which I don't know if the research would indicate that they do those things or not. I'm not sure. There's not a lot of research on it, at least in American journals. But I hope that's answered. I kind of ramble a bit on these questions. I should be like, I don't know. You in the back there.
How do you get from stage to stage? I mean, do you get it with experience, or can you actually study it?
That's a really good question too. I think experience is probably the best debate teacher that I know of. Like, I don't really do a lot of plenary talks like this about debate. I'm usually like, let's have a practice. And it's just practice, practice, practice. I think that's how, because then you start to recognize certain things. Like, you start to see the bull. You're like, oh, I see what I could have done, and now I'm losing. Right? Or you take hold of the mind. You say, okay, I was going to go off in that direction, but I'm not. I'm going to stick to the things that even though in my gut I feel I should respond to this because I know the answer, that's a waste of time that I could be using on something else. And that would be much more taming the bull here, right? Instead of this, you get this. Or then you're like this, and you do this long enough, you're like, I feel pretty comfortable in this debate. I'm going to do it like this, right? So how to move from stage to stage, it's a very fluid thing. And it also might be that some stages have elements of the other stages in them. So you look to like old Chinese map of the universe, which hopefully I can draw to where you can see it. Kind of looks like this. You've seen this symbol before, yeah? Like Pepsi stole this years ago. Right? And then there's a little bit, this is the map of the ancient Chinese map of the universe the Taoists drew. So you have like it's flowing into each other, and you have some dark and some light, and then a little bit of dark and a little bit of light in each thing. So it's all sort of interconnected in a way. Or it's all sort of flowing into itself in a way. So as far as like, is there a track where you can say, I completed step 1, I completed step 2? No, but it might help you think about, this might help a student think about their relationship in metaphor and then make their own breakthrough. Because teaching in the East is very different. It's like the teacher talks, and then you go off by yourself to contemplate what they said, and if you don't get it, it's your fault. This kind of thing. So I went and lectured in Japan once, and my friend who's Japanese, he's like, your lecture's never going to go over. Because I asked a lot of questions and stuff. And so I was like, no, he doesn't know what he's talking about. So I went there, and no one said a thing. I'd be like, what do you think? Everyone just pretended as if I hadn't done it. So it's this very like introspective sort of thing. So these were designed with that introspective view in mind. So it's really, I think, up to you to determine how to move from stage to stage. But experience is the best teacher of debate, I think. I mean, all I can do is teach you to feel a little bit more confident about what you're saying. And that's it. That's all I can do for you. That's it. The rest of it has to come through experience, I think. So, Isba, and then we'll go over here. And then
do you think that reason is the ultimate reflection of what the world is? So, like, as we make our arguments, we go through these various stages, and and then we get to a certain stage, and then we come back, and then we get to a certain stage, and we come back. But insofar as reason is the ultimate thing, do you think that that's the reflection of the world, or do you think anybody actually achieves it?
to achieve accurate representation of the world?
Or like just to become a reasonable person or a rational person.
See, that's the thing about rationality and reason that are really funny is everyone thinks they're one, and they also think that everyone else is missing. Like you watch some political story and you're like, if people just had some common sense, we wouldn't be in this problem. And everyone else is saying the same thing on the TV. They're like, if the other party just had some common sense, if they would just be reasonable. Reasonability is like one of these God terms that we have now that we all want to appeal to. Like we all want to be reasonable. It's one of these terms that's way up there. But as far as what that means and what it looks like, I don't know if we could ever achieve it because obviously reason becomes a toy when we're arguing. Right? That's kind of what the stuff says. I don't know if we could reach anything like that, but I think we can convince people that we're more reasonable than our opponents. I think we can do that rhetorically all the time. And we might not actually be more reasonable. That might be something that we can't determine. But to an audience like this, I could convince you that I'm reasonable. Right? Like nobody asked me for any kind of credentials or ID or anything. I just got up here and started talking. I could be a crazy person. Just wandered in. And here I am to give a talk. The poor guy who's supposed to do the talk is out in the street. You know, I mean, we take a lot of things on faith. And that's another thing about it too, is a lot of times to argue well, you have to have some kind of faith in the system or the thing of how it works. And so that's another thing I'm thinking about too, is how does faith interact with debating? Like we have faith that we're getting something out of this, or else we wouldn't do it all the time, or we wouldn't enjoy it. But what is that thing that we're getting? Nobody can really name it, but we all sort of have some faith that the next step, I mean, it takes a tremendous amount of faith to walk. I know that the earth will be in a position where my foot will land on it the next time I step. Those kind of things we don't think about. But the earth is spinning really fast, and it's hurtling through space, and all these things are happening, and we kind of go around our day and be like, yep, time for a coffee, time to read a book. This is great. It's the same thing with debate, too, I think. So, who over here wanted to ask something? Somebody? Yeah?
You kind of started to answer it when you were asked about moving through the stages, but I wonder if you have complete control of yourself moving through the stages, or if it's like other people, other factors. Do you think it's really truly up to like one person to get through all of them?
Yeah, I mean, that might be a pretty good critique of this, because it's the character in these woodcuts goes out into the woods by himself, right? And so, but in the debate tournament, we're not really by ourselves. And there's a culture of debate that's come before us, and all the great debaters you admire who've come before you. And then there's all the newer debaters who are coming after you, who you think are really good, and you're like really excited to look out for how they're doing. And then there's your own performance, and you're hoping that you're getting better. And all these things, I think, shape it too. It might not be up to you. It might be that just all of a sudden in some debate you feel like, strong enough to do this. Or in some debate you're like, I don't really need to do that. I should use my everyday mind and come up with stuff. There's a great, I use, as a tangent to this, I use a lot of samurai stuff when I teach too. This is sort of newer material for me. Usually I give a talk about samurai and ancient samurai codes and stuff. And there's one great quote that I just thought of, but now I've forgotten what it was. About whether it's up to you or not, or yourself. I can't remember it. But I use a lot of that stuff too, but it's generally, you want to cross swords with everybody you meet. It's sort of one of these maxims that comes out of that. So it's like you don't want to back down from any kind of, even if you think you're going to lose, you don't want to back down because it'll just make you a better sword person. I don't know what the politically correct term for that is. It's not swordsman, sword person. But more importantly, we've had two presentations in a row that mentioned swords. Anybody else? I hope that answered it okay. But I think the inclusion of culture, this sort of has its own cultural biases as well. Like I said, the proper way to learn is the teacher dispenses truth to you and then you go meditate on it. And that's the proper way to learn. This definitely has sediment of that, because here you are by yourself, here you are as nothing, coming back, and then you go and tell someone else to go off in the woods and tame the ox. Anybody else? Yeah? Okay, you and then you.
Going back to your difference between reason and argumentation, I was thinking of something which is kind of a more philosophical and also an obvious Kantian question, but I think it also translates into, it has some practical implications. And that's that even in the form in which reason is subjugating to argumentation, you still need a standard according to which you evaluate argumentation,
Right.
and where the is not reason.
Right.
Now that, for me, translates into a rather practical thing when it comes to teaching, and not only teaching debate, but also teaching in general. And that's how do you actually apply that? Because if you focus only on your student developing those argumentation skills, you still need a framework, also among other things, power relationships that claim that you are the one who
Right.
knows what good argumentation is. So, elaborate on that.
No, I think